If I told you that a small fursuit maker from Europe a few months ago would be at the center of one of the most expensive fursuits sold, you probably would have laughed at me. This fursuit slot was sold at a whopping $50,000, being at the previous record holder set at $17,000 by Mixed Candy back in 2018. On the surface, this might seem like an outrageous price for a fursuit that typically sells at a few $1,000s. However, as we'll come to see, the amount of money spent on this fursuit is not only expected, but it's going to become normal in the next few years. Before we get ahead of ourselves, we need to see how this all started. On May 24th, Zuri Studios put up a listing for a custom fursuit on a site called the Dealer Stand, a place to buy and sell furry merchandise. There, they started the bidding at $5,000. Now, you might have noticed that the fursuit was put up for auction. For most makers, they typically name their price through a quote. Once a quote is given, the buyer can either accept or reject the price. If they accept, they'll be put in a queue where they'll wait for their fursuit to be made. Unlike most goods, fursuit building is not easily scalable. Since these costumes are handmade and individualized to the buyer, it's very hard to streamline the process to increase supply. When supply is low and demand relatively unchanged, there's a shortage, and as a result of that shortage, prices go up to compensate. The cost of getting a fursuit from established makers has gone up slowly over the years as they gain more experience and as more people want a fursuit. But why in this particular make headlines? I can explain that with three simple factors behind why Zuri Studios is able to sell for so much. Of course, we can't talk about how the fursuit sold for so much without talking about its quality. You can market a fursuit and have people notice it all you want, but if no one believes it's good, no one's gonna buy it. From the makers, the costumes are of high quality, and buyers have generally given them good reviews. However, quality alone is not enough to sell a fursuit, especially one that eventually went for $50,000. Now, we can't talk about the past year without mentioning the pandemic. As people were ordered to stay at home, they naturally spent less as a result of having less things to do, along with wanting to save more in times of uncertainty. As a result, savings rates have gone through the roof. As the economy starts to return to normal though, this saved money will be quickly spent as people start going out again. You can see how some rich furries were willing to spend so much for an artwork of one of their favorite characters, and this has been no different during COVID-19. Now, this is the secret that allows for prices to be as high as they got. Remember how fursuits are usually sold? When it comes to pricing, no fursuit maker is going to accurately determine the price of a fursuit for each given buyer. There are certain factors that can help determine the price, but nothing is going to be perfect. In the fursuit maker's ideal world, everyone would pay the maximum price for the fursuit. Unfortunately, since that's not really possible, the next best option is having people decide for themselves through an auction. Everybody bids against each other until there's one person who gives the maximum amount they are willing to pay. Imagine if a pre-made fursuit was sold to individual people at a fixed price. It wouldn't nearly get as much money as an auction would. As long as fursuit makers are able to find customers who have and are willing to spend the money to buy a fursuit, they have maximized their earning potential for the amount of work they're doing. Now, what does this mean for the future of fursuit making? Well, I predict that larger, more established makers will see the situation and decide to pivot at least a portion of their business to auctioning off commission slots instead of having a waiting list. Given how long some lines have gotten for certain makers, it's only natural this becomes the next step for these small businesses to continue making fursuits for years to come. Although some people are rightfully worried about the future of fursuit prices and whether they'll be priced out of the market, new and upcoming fursuit makers will be there to fill in the void that more experienced makers have left. There will always be a maker wanting someone like you who will fit your preferences and price points. If you want more reviews into furry culture, make sure to subscribe for more analyses like this.